In summary, obviously you just need to get rid of the methods to upgrade the character. This game shouldn't need you to farm materials to level up or ascend them. You shouldn't also need to level up or ascend weapons for that matter. Getting rid of the Demon Wedge system will of course be really beneficial to the longevity of this game as well as leveling skills. Let's just get rid of that as well. Basically, I think when you get a character, you should just be passively leveling them from running stages, but otherwise they're pretty much at their absolute strongest level right from the gate. This is, I think, the best way to make this game better. Okay, let's talk about Duet Night Abyss. Some of you may know, I've been playing a lot of Duet Night Abyss, and I want to talk about it because if you've been living under a rock, or maybe you have the world's shoddiest internet connection, for example, you might want to know that this game is basically anime Warframe, especially with the monetization. It used to be a gacha game, but then they dropped the gacha. Characters and weapons can basically be bought outright, otherwise they can be farmed for completely free to play as well. I have in fact farmed at least the equivalent of one weapon and a bunch of characters basically for free. There are also some mechanics that stuck around when it was a gacha, like the free and the paid battle pass options. So what I want to do is I want to go through the things that I really like about the game, as well as the things that I'm not particularly enjoying at the present moment that I think could use some improvement. But then I also want to talk about how I've been going with a specific character to the game that I've gone ahead and basically hyper invested out the ass because I am obviously an Electro main now and always. But before we begin, let me just say hello everyone, welcome back. Okay, if this is something that you're interested in, Duet Night Abyss, like the video, subscribe to the channel. That'll give me an indicator about whether or not there's a lot of interest in this kind of content. Maybe I'll make some more videos on this game. But either way, let's get into it. Let's start off with what I like in the game. Combat gameplay. Generally speaking, each character has 2 abilities and a passive. Some characters have consonant weapons. You can also equip a melee and a ranged weapon as well. Now, for the most part, it's kind of like playing Warframe and Genshin simultaneously. We'll talk about balance a little bit later, but suffice to say, I have been liking using the abilities of some characters. There's 2 of them in particular who I have enjoyed. One is called Sibylle, and she's a lot of fun. Her entire shtick is being a tiny girl with an unfathomably large sword. The idea is to build up combos, same kind of combo meter like it is in Warframe, for example, and as you get closer to the S rank combo meter, you can then consider charging up your sword to actually get more combo without having to hit more enemies. And then when it has reached the absolute maximum, you can do a great big slam that does a lot of damage. And on top of that, she also has a gap closer skill, so she's kind of like Illidan from Heroes of the Storm. Now, out of the few characters that I have tried, Sibylle is easily one of the most fun, and you can get her just by doing the equivalent of Spiral Abyss in this game. It's called Mystic Maze, and it's basically a bunch of floors and a bunch of doors. The other thing I like as well is team building. What's also part of the combat gameplay is that you can openly summon a couple of allies for both overworld stuff and commissions as well. There are a handful of mission types, I think, where you can't use them, so just bear that in mind. They pretty much work like specters from Warframe, although what's great about these folks is that you can summon them endlessly and they don't seem to have a duration, and on top of that, for the most part, they have pretty solid AI. Although I hear that apparently some of the characters' AIs might not be so great, and certainly the melee character AIs could be improved. I have been noticing that they try to stick close to you, even in missions like defense variants, for example. I'd rather they just be a lot more free roaming and just attack enemies from, let's say, a little bit further away from me so that they can deal with one side, I'll deal with another side. That kind of thing would be really nice. But for the most part, they do what the character is meant to do. So I've basically always had a pocket healer available for the most part without having really a problem. And then of course I want to talk about getting constellations. I mean, Introns. Okay, obviously this is not a thing in Warframe. At best we have regular Warframes, and then of course we have primes. But in Genshin, we of course have things like the 6 constellations. Unless you're Aloy. when is she ever going to get constellations? Okay, moving on. Whilst it's usually easier to get the 4-star constellations in Genshin, it's usually very expensive to go all the way for the 5-star ones. So it's kind of impressively satisfying to be able to just farm Introns for all the characters in the game. As far as I know, there's no ranking system in place that differentiates the characters into like 4-star or 5-star. The main thing is that different characters get their relics. I mean, secret letters, oh my god, unlocked and readily available to farm at different adventure rates. I mean, trial levels. I have a C6 character. Sorry, I meant an I6 character. Oh my god, my brain's so broken. It did take me many hours altogether and many runs that did get a bit mind-numbing, not gonna lie. But I split it over 6 days actually, so it didn't end up being that much of a painful experience, honestly. So I can keep doing that for whoever else I decide to go all the way with, especially because, let me say this nice and clearly, there is no resin in the game. What a huge difference that makes. Suddenly I can play the game at my own pace, and I can do whatever I want whenever I want. Now, that being said, let me just say this. The closest thing we have to resin, technically, would be the commission manuals, as they increase the loot drop rate by different amounts. You can still farm stuff without them if you want, they just end up obviously being slower. Dailies give about 30 of the ×2 drop rate types, so there's definitely plenty to go around. I am in favor of making these maybe more readily available, as they are used on a per mission basis, but I'm also in favor of instead making them time-based. For example, like using one means 1 hour of extra drops instead of just on a per mission, actually per reward basis. Not sure who my next target will be though at the present moment. I haven't really been paying that much attention to anyone else outside of my queen. But yeah, being able to get introns like this is in fact one of the things that I really like about the game. Now, I didn't mention the story in the game, and that's mainly because I actually ended up loosely following it in the most part, but that's because I ended up using that skip button that a lot of people have been kicking and screaming about having for something like Genshin. There's definitely some interesting aspects in the story that I managed to pick up, but I guess I didn't really get hooked onto it right at the start, or at least early enough for me to maybe, actually pay too much attention to it. At some point, my desire to be able to play my queen to her absolute fullest extent pretty much took over, so yeah. I'm not super familiar with what's going on in the story at the present moment. So as much as I'd like to spoil the story, honestly, I'm not entirely sure what's going on either, and I might have to consult an explainer video before I get into all of that. But I do remember seeing some things that people were hoping for in the Genshin story to come to fruition in the DNA story. So speaking of story though, I do want to also shout out a specific character in the English dubbing of the game that I have been liking a lot exclusively because of their voice acting direction. Around town, there are these small NPCs that I think are called Lunos, and one of them happens to be in the sanctuary, the main hub, as the blacksmith. It's hilarious that this Luno, who has a mustache for some reason, I swear to God, sounds like a girl putting on a boy's voice.
Listen up, kiddo! A weapon is like your life partner. You gotta treat it well.
Which, if my reading of this character is correct, actually makes perfect sense. I'm not going to question the gender of this Luno blacksmith, but every time I go to the forge to build something, I really enjoy listening to what she says, even though she kind of only says like 1 or 2 lines at best.
Have you come across any treasures lately? Show me, and I might forge a truly extraordinary weapon out of it.
And in Japanese, I swear she sounds like Dory from Genshin. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct, but she does. So critical support to the Luno Smith, goated character as far as I can tell. Now, a few things that I'm not a huge fan of that I would like to see improved or changed. I just want to note that whilst I'm about to bring up a whole bunch of things that I personally am not liking, that doesn't actually mean that I dislike the game more than I like it. In the grand scheme of things, I'm still enjoying the game quite a lot, and I think I will continue to play this game quite a lot. But if these things that I mentioned could maybe get adjusted and or fixed in some way, shape or form, I think that would actually make the game a lot better to play. Let's start with Demon Wedge names. Demon Wedges are basically mods. The funny thing is that a lot of them are basically corrupted mods. They give a stronger buff to one stat at the expense of another. That part is cool. I have no problem with that. But what's not cool is their naming convention. It seems to be wildly arbitrary and honestly really difficult to wrap my head around. In Warframe, the names of mods can at least be mildly descriptive. Stretch for more ability range. Natural Talent, which makes your abilities activate faster. Serration for more rifle damage. Split Chamber for more multi-shot. You can at least squint at the names and get a vague idea of what they do, and then of course if you want to really know what they do, you can obviously have a look at what they actually do. But meanwhile, in Duet Night Abyss, impetus wedges give attack percent. I'm not entirely sure how the energy with which a body moves has to do with more damage. Blaze types give dual stats. Depending on the element type of that particular demon wedge, they give different dual stats. Doesn't sound that readily apparent if you ask me. Trammel types give more status chance. Trigger probability. They give more trigger probability. Trammel apparently means the restriction to freedom of action. What exactly does that have to do with triggering more elemental procs? You tell me in the comments below. Essentially, I'm not a fan of the naming convention at the present moment, and it'll probably take me a while to wrap my head around it. Oh, and speaking of elemental procs, let's talk about elemental procs. We have 6 elements: Pyro, Hydro, Anemo, Electro, Lumino, Light, and Umbro, Dark. Instead of reactions like in Genshin or the actual elemental status effects like in Warframe, DNA has elected to just do elemental advantage damage. Hydro is stronger than Pyro, which is stronger than Anemo for some reason, which is stronger than Electro for some reason, which is stronger than Hydro. Lumino and Umbro apparently just do extra damage against each other. And apparently, remembering this is kind of essential because the advantage with the stronger element is like a 4 times multiplier, whilst the disadvantage actively cuts your damage in half. There's also some physical elements: Slash, Spike, and Smash. First 2 are just stronger against shields or health. Smash, however, has something to do with stance, which I don't really understand off the top of my head. I haven't been paying enough attention clearly to know what that is about. Let me know if you know in the comments below. Here's the thing. I'm not a fan of how simplistic the system is. I really like the reaction system in Genshin. I think it's super neat and it encourages team building around it. I really like Warframe's elemental damage system because the elements actually bring a vast array of useful buffs and debuffs that you can mix and match around. What's great is that you can bring characters of different elements into your commissions in Duet Night Abyss as AIs, but at the end of the day, not only does it turn out that your weapon's elemental damage type is dependent on your character's element, so for reasons my weapons are almost certainly going to be doing electro damage, if you build higher trigger probability on them, what ends up happening is that they'll just simply end up doing some periodic elemental damage capped at 6 stacks for some reason, unless you're playing light or dark, in which case there's also an extra effect, but upon reading them they don't seem that important in the grand scheme of things. So basically, mixing my Electro with, let's say, an AI Rebecca's Hydro and Lisbel's Lumino, for example, doesn't seem to appear to yield any particularly interesting results compared to just bringing 2 other random characters that I've built high status chance on. So I can't say I'm a fan of the elemental system. There's also this thing going on right now between the balance of weapon DPS versus ability DPS. It seems that weapons are notably doing a lot less damage than abilities. If you ask anyone, you're generally treating your weapon as a stat stick, specifically for the passive effect that it brings, because for some inexplicable reason, those passive effects actually affect the character as well. That part is cool, by the way. I have no issue with that. But what I'm not a fan of is how weapons do seem to be doing almost no damage in higher level content compared to abilities, so I would actually also like to see weapons overall get buffed so that they seem at least at parity with abilities so that they can at least feel meaningful if you decide to use them. I also want to briefly mention character voice lines. Whenever you open up a character's combat stats screens, they'll speak their line, but there's only one line that they have for that particular UI, so they'll always be saying the exact same thing every single time. So I would like the devs to spend more time on some more voice lines and maybe add an ICD on voice lines for characters as well. That would be really nice. And finally, the slowdown. as of writing, I am currently trial level 53. I'm trying to get to trial level 55, and it is taking a particularly longer time compared to previous levels. Now, normally, this wouldn't be that much of an issue, and I would just take it as it is because it would have otherwise a similar function to, let's say, adventure or mastery ranks in Genshin or Warframe. But the reason why this slowdown is feeling particularly annoying is that it turns out your character development is in fact locked behind certain trial levels. I can't ascend my characters or weapons past level 60 right now, and whilst I can use all the Demon Wedge slots on my weapons, there is, however, one slot on my characters that is still locked. And on top of that, I can't even level up my abilities past level 6 right now. So maxing out trial level does feel incredibly important. As the game continues on, I expect new players to not suffer through this because they'll be able to get more trial XP by playing more of the story. So if more of the story is available, there we go. But as of writing, it seems like I have been relegated to just unlocking new wedges and building new weapons. That part is fine, but it is very time consuming and weapons require quite a few layers of grinding in order to actually build them. All of this to say, just getting up to trial level 55 is frustratingly slow, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to need to go all the way to like 65 if I want a fully upgraded character. I'm not entirely sure. So those are the big things I really like about the game and some of the main things that I think need improvement. Now, I also want to talk about the character that I've spent the most time playing. A woman who I've made a couple of community posts about now. A woman who I also went ahead and spent money on to get her earlier than I could have. A woman who I recently discovered has Tanaka Rie as her Japanese voice actor, which is both hilarious and a little bit spooky actually for me, because for those who don't know, Tanaka Rie is actually the voice actor of one of my most favorite Gundam waifus, one Lux Krain. And even better, she's also Lisa's Japanese voice actor. That's right, the Lisa. My wife, my lover, my life. Lisa. Now and always. I don't know, look, I didn't know this was the case until I started writing this part of the script for this video. The game had already been out for, where are we up to now, like a month? That's crazy that I somehow managed to pick Sibylle, the local Electro Mommy, as the character that I was going to be playing a lot more of compared to other characters, despite whatever meta discussions exist around her. But I didn't know that I had just randomly picked the character whose Japanese voice is apparently also Lisa. In case you don't know what Sibylle's kit is, her skill is a cloud that shoots lightning at nearby enemies. Her ult is an orb that links up to 10 enemies and attacks them regularly. If it gets hit though, it transfers some of the damage to those linked enemies. On top of that, her passive is an extra energy system type dealio that builds up points as long as you trigger status procs. Her skill will actually disappear if you don't have any special energy left. So, what have I gotten up to with Sibylle? Let's have a look. We have level 60 out of 60 right now because, like I mentioned, I can't go any further as of writing this. 666 talents with all but 2 of the extra passives unlocked. What's interesting is that Sibylle is actually an HP scaler, which is a little bit different to how it usually works in Genshin, where the newer Hydro characters are actually HP scalers. I haven't been stacking too much HP on my Sibylle though, because I have been deciding to go for more wedges that give skill damage and range. I have also got a bit of morale as well, because apparently that's supposed to be an additional multiplier on her DPS. I have gone ahead and I6'd her, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, because she is the one for me, and apparently, according to some people, she needs those Introns. Speaking of Introns, let's talk about Introns real quick. Her first one is a damage transfer if her skill hits her ult. It is a little bit whatever, because at the end of the day, her skill's initial hit may be AoE, but the rest of her attacks aren't. So ideally, I guess for more damage, you want to be attacking directly, but it's still kind of useful, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. Her I2 increases her passive's extra energy system point cap, and it further buffs her ability damage, so it's actually kind of nice for an I2 so far. Her I3 and I5 are talent levels. Her I4 gives her skill some 20% status chance, which is actually kind of nice, since even just triggering elemental procs will give you some more of that passive extra energy mechanic. And then finally we have her I6, which makes it so that anyone who gets linked up to her ult immediately takes a sizable hit of damage. It has actually made farming some missions a lot easier, quicker, because I could just drop her ult in one place and that will just lock down that entire area. Then I go ahead and use her skills in other places, which actually shuts down another entire area, so that farming these missions end up being a lot faster. The weapon that I have been using for a while now is called Embla Inflorescence, which I have also decided to just straight up buy, because it's a cool-ass homing missile bow. I have been playing with some other bows as well, namely the Searing Sand Whisper, which I got early. Look, the Searing Sand Whisper feels more like a normal bow, but I have been enjoying the Embla a lot more because, among other things, it does seem to be, well, quite a fair bit stronger. Because the idea is that you lock onto enemies and then you fire a huge volley of missiles. So instead of playing a bow that's more of a bow, it's kind of like a Katyusha rocket launcher. And it turns out that attack speed, aka fire rate, affects how quickly you lock onto enemies. So I've kind of gone a little bit overboard with that, along with some huge multi-shot from this multi-shot demon Wedge that, for the most part, doesn't seem to result in that much DPS because it has a great big attack nerf. Is, after all, a corrupted mod, but it does seem to help with Sibylle's whole status procs equals extra energy for a skill ult mechanic, so that's of course really useful. I can also lock onto her ult orb, which I think helps. Might as well, since I never seem to find myself with an ammo issue with this bow. Now, putting weapon passives aside for a second, what I found to be the most useful weapons for her in the melee sense are actually spears. The reason why is because you can throw spears out in combat and they can become these floating spinning attacks. So you can then pop her ult, which if you pop it right over a thrown spear, then it's also taking damage from that spinning spear and then chucking it onto 10 nearby enemies. In lower and, let's say, normal level content, for me at least, this does seem to be working like a charm, so it has been very, very useful. But in higher level content, it did end up being very kind of whatever. But now I don't have that much of an issue in making sure that she has all 600 of her special energy point cap. So I did end up going ahead and farming her signature whipsword, Undying Oneiros. Is that how you pronounce it? Because this weapon's passive gives Sibylle a whole heap of HP, which is of course something that she scales off for DPS, as of writing now, it currently has refined 0. I mean, smelting level 0, but because of how badly the farming went for this weapon, where I somehow ended up with 2 blueprints, the rare part, before even a single grip, which is uncommon by the way, I can in fact craft another whipsword, and that is in fact on the way as of writing it. So, you know what, I might as well turn it into a smelting level 1. If you trigger status procs with this weapon, you can get more HP. So I've pretty much just stacked status chance and attack speed on it. I don't really care about its damage at the present moment. I'm hoping for future updates to introduce new and easily accessible wedges that I can use to get even more attack speed, because I'm not really feeling much interest in the attack animations for this type of weapon. So I kind of want to just get the stacks and then just go back to using my bow or using my skills. That's where I'm at with Sibylle's development right now. And look, I actually enjoy playing her a lot. Part of it is because of her gameplay loop. There's time for me to actually go ahead and use that bow of mine. So if weapons get a rebalancing to be a much more meaningful part of our damage output, that alone might actually be really, really amazing for someone like her. And I do actually feel a bit of that sentiment floating around in the community right now towards non-attack scalers and how they seem to be significantly weaker than attack scalers like Lisbon and Rebecca. What I'm appreciating about Sibylle though is that because of how tanky she is with how much HP that you can build on her for her to scale with damage, I don't actually find myself dying that much. There have been some boss fights and some higher level missions where both my AI teammates, being Lisbon and let's say Daphne, aren't famously HP scalers. They end up dying and I have to revive them, but I still end up being pretty healthy with Sibylle for the most part. Also, if HP scalers found themselves doing similar damage as attack scalers, we'd basically have the Nivelet situation when we were still in Fontaine. He was kind of ridiculously strong back then, but at the same time, I suspect we might be getting some wedges in particular that will be favoring HP scalers a lot, because there's already wedges that give, let's say, attack and skill damage, but none that give HP and skill damage, for example. Plus, since this game isn't a gacha like Genshin, theoretically there should be less reason to prevent the devs from doing, let's say, a character balance pass from time to time. We'll just have to see. So in summary, loving the combat for the most part, loving Sibylle, loving how we don't have Resin. Not liking the confusing naming conventions, not a fan of the rather boring elemental system, and I'm not a fan of the current growth of trial levels and how they seem super important to character development. Overall, I recommend giving this game a really solid go. If you're able to pay more attention to the story than I did, then there's probably something in there that is actually really fascinating that I may or may not have skipped. I am still loosely following it, But if some super interesting stuff happens next patch, for example, then maybe I'll actually start paying a lot more attention to the story by watching some story recap videos, for example, even though I probably won't be doing any Duet Night Abyss story content on stream or anything like that anytime soon. I don't really have the time to do that, and I'd much rather spend it on Genshin story right now. Or Warframe story when we get, you know, things like the old piece and all that jazz. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. What character in Duet Night Abyss are you maining? How are you going with them? Let me know in the comments. Let's talk about it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, maybe, for more Duet Night Abyss action. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.さっさとどきなさい。もっと大声で泣きなさい。